I'm going to introduce myself briefly, but also want to introduce the other folks that are going to join in on the panel tonight. My name is Minzner. I'm the Director of Inclusion and Advocacy at CRI, and also serve as the High Performance Director for US Para Rowing. CRI being a national para team training center is kind of like, how did we get here? What is this all about? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So joining me is our manager of the para and military programs at CRI, Raphi. She's going to save me from myself on these Zoom meetings because she knows how to run them way better, but she's also deeply involved in the programs. We'll be speaking about intakes and how we onboard people and the structure of the programs. We've got Libby Lichter, one of our amazing coaches who works with youth para, even Row Boston, all over the map with our programs. She's fabulous. We've got Bodhi, our amazing, engineer, guru, get it all done shop person that helps us get on the water safely with custom equipment. And Jen Fitzroy from the training center, athlete, PR2 rower, is going to be talking about her experiences later in the panel as well. So we've got athletes, coaches, boatmen, and myself, and we will obviously take questions. Raphi will help monitor that for us as we go. But I'm just going to start out with a brief introduction of like how the heck I got here and we got here. I started coaching as a part-time gig when I first got out of college in 1988. Community rowing, we weren't even in the rink. We were in the little shed, which is now the Wellesley Newton Country Day structure. And I didn't know really much about coaching at all. And they were like, oh, coach this guy, he's got disabilities, his name's Fred Mita, and here's some duct tape and let us know how it goes. And luckily Fred Mita was an amazing athlete. He rowed para rowing before anyone really had a name for that. Military veteran, used to row the head of the Charlton and Alden, rowing like 56 strokes a minute down the course. He was an awesome athlete. And I think for me, that was like my first introduction to coaching people with disabilities. We were just literally flying by the seat of our pants back then. And but that's kind of what you have to do to get involved with para rowing. In any case, it's a lot of trial and error, and try as we might to standardize things and make it easier on the equipment side. We really realized that every athlete is completely unique, needs a completely unique setup, and the program has evolved along those lines with the blood, sweat, and tears of folks like Gary Pantadosi before me, Jeannie Watson, a whole range of people that just really wanted to make sure that community rowing from day one lived up to its motto of rowing for all. So I came back to CRI in a few different versions of myself, but in this specific position around 2011, and we had Tuesday, Thursday evening para, and it was like an all comers, and isn't this great? It's growing, and suddenly we had like 18 or 19 people trying to get on the water at once in a Tuesday, Thursday session. And it was like, man, we got to change something here. We don't want to separate too much because it was a really awesome community, but we started to really specialize into different user groups that would be maybe more suited to separated programs that we can have it either by equipment or by interest and goals. So that's kind of how we started developing the programs that we have here. Being a competitive person myself, always enjoyed racing, even with the master's programs at CRI when we were out of the Proctor Boathouse. And we always put this element of competition onto it. And there was not really many opportunities to race for people with disabilities. And I thought, well, geez, there's at least one race we can go to, and that's trials. So going from like no racing really whatsoever, I think it was maybe 2013, I was like, well, that's a race, it's in New Jersey, let's go to trials. And so CRI went with a group of athletes and won quite a few races and ended up sort of catapulting itself onto the national scene, maybe due in some part to the fact that there was not a lot of competition there, but nonetheless, we had begun hosting the selection camp for the PR3-4 in 2013, sending people to trials in 2014. We really pushed the head of the Charles to expand opportunities, and recently they have really embraced this idea of inclusion racing, and we had just maybe 16 different entries at the head of the Charles in the inclusion racing categories, starting around 2015 and growing every year. And that has become sort of the most visible part of what we do from an external perspective, at least. It's not the only thing we do, but that has gained us a lot of notoriety when our athletes are out there representing the club at these high-level events, to the point where we're now a Paralympic training center, having hosted that silver medal winning PR3-4 since 2013. And that's kind of where we are right now. We have a host of different types of programs that Raphi can give you a summary of, and they include youth, adults, intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, military veterans. And I'm just really, really proud of the sort of the menu of offerings that we have, so that we really do have the ability to serve anyone for whom we think rowing could be safe, productive, and fun. So Raphi, maybe give some insight as to the different types of programs that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Ellen mentioned, we kind of run the gambit on, types of programs that we offer to our para participants. And this really begins with a very robust intake process. So I'm going to quickly walk you guys through what that looks like, and then tell you a little bit about what the different programs are, how they operate, et cetera. So an athlete typically, these days, athletes typically find CRI through word of mouth, through reputation. We have many external partners that we work with, such as Adaptive Sports New England, Spalding EXPD, Boston Children's Hospital. The list really just keeps on going. So we get a lot of referrals from those external partners, and then we frequently get friends of our current participants to come and join us, which are, personally my favorite, because I think that's just a testament to the rigor of the programs we are running, that people actually want to bring their friends to CRI to enjoy what we're doing. And so an athlete will often, however they hear about it, they typically will email me or Ellen or someone in the outreach department. And then I will share with them our intake form, which is a very preliminary first pass at information about basic demographics, age, type of disability, interest level in, what type of programming they're interested in, et cetera. We ask a pretty wide range of questions just to gather as much information as we can, because the more we know about our athletes, the more we can make sure that the program that they are participating in is as tailored to them as possible. So once we do that initial review, me and the intake coaches will often take a beat, discuss what we're seeing, and then my intake staff will work with the participant to find a time for an initial physical assessment. And this is, it's a continued get to know you. It's a continued face-to-face of like, what are your interests? How can we help you achieve those goals? And what are you able to do physically? What are you able to do in terms of strength, endurance, all that. So it's a very comprehensive review, even right off the bat. And once that first physical intake has happened, that's typically when we bring Bodhi in to be the equipment guru, the equipment genius that we all desperately need. And he will work with my intake staff to make sure that the new participant or new athlete has equipment that is unique to them and fits their needs as closely as we possibly can. This can be a really wide range of things, from entire seat fabrication. Bodhi will talk to you a little bit about some seats he has built from scratch. This might be a clever little trick with a pool noodle to make sure someone's feet are sitting right. So it's a really wide range of things that we're able to provide, and we're very lucky to have an in-house shop that makes all of this fabrication possible, and of course then the genius behind the shop. And so once we were at a point where we've got equipment that the intake coach, Bodhi, and the athlete feel confident in, that's when we'll start to move towards a couple of targeted private lessons to work through either any areas where a new athlete is feeling a little bit insecure, or just, you know, for some people it's just like, I've never been this close to the water in such a tiny boat. Like, how do I not flip? So we make sure that the athletes feel very confident both on land and on the water before we integrate them into a program. So at that point, there's a lot of programs to choose from. We really run the gamut in terms of age, ability, competition level. Everything from the very therapeutic all the way up to, obviously, as Ellen was sharing with you earlier, the Paralympic training level of programming. And this breaks down also in terms of age. We have a specific teen para program that we started about 1.5 years ago that has honestly really taken off in COVID, which is really, really amazing to see that you know, we're able to sustain a program that is geared towards competition, even in a time when we are not able to compete. We also have a specific program for teens and young adults with intellectual disabilities that Libby will probably tell you a little bit more about. She's been working with them for about 2 years and is a wonderful coach with them. Then we also have our more general open para classes that people who just, you know, want to get a row in a couple times a week, but, you know, they can sort of choose their own adventure in this group, right? Like they can approach it as this is a fun thing that I do to socialize with my rowing friends, or, you know, I'm doing this to train for you know, Head of the Charles. I'm doing this to train for Gold Cup in Philly or something. So we're very lucky that we're able to support athletes in this very open environment, and so that they are able to collaborate with each other, learn from each other, and really meet their needs that way. And so then as the new participants integrate into these various programs, I will stay in touch with them pretty closely for the first little bit. And then as needed throughout their time at CRI, you know, if we have, for example, a teen who ages out of teen para and into an open class, me and my staff will do everything we can to make those transitions as smooth as possible. And then also in the direction of every now and then we will have para athletes that it actually makes sense for them to join one of our regular CRIs, just like scheduled programming classes. And so that's a project that I will you know, typically work pretty closely, at least for the first few weeks, with whichever general CRI coach is working with one of our para athletes to make sure that the adjustment is as smooth as possible, and that we're able to really provide the experience that all of our athletes are craving. And then, of course, you know, we have seen athletes very successfully go through from taking their first strokes at CRI all the way up until competing at nationals or even internationally with our Paralympic team. And so that is another, I guess, like tangential way that our athletes will move through our programming. It's just like a slightly different sequence of progression that's usually very driven by their own interests, their own drive to compete. I think that pretty much covers it in terms of what we're doing now. But I'm going to turn it over to Bodhi now, and he'll tell you all about the amazing things he does in the shop.
Wow, thanks, Raphi. Sweet, yeah. Yeah, there's been a couple of you may see some images up here on the screen. This is some you know, results from the Head of the Charles 2019. We've had Ebba Einarson and Johan Svensson that they brought their seat from their other rowing shell to the US to race in the Head of the Charles in the 2019 event. And there were a lot of modifications that need to happen after that. So Raphi, if you can sort of click on, there's that's Del Mas's seat, but somewhere in the middle of those, if you keep scrolling through, we'll come back to Del Mas. Okay, yeah, right there. Yeah, there you go. Great, thanks, Raphi. So this was one of the modifications that we had to make, and it's a little difficult to sort of see what we have, but just on the left and the right sides of the photograph, you can see a metal set of slide or rails where I was able to sort of like modify the rails because the gap in the old boat was a little bit smaller than the gap in the boat that they used here at CRI. So we were able to sort of like make some modifications and make some bolts and elevate that. What you see in this photograph is you see the backstay, the thing that really supports Ebba's back and her seat. Yeah, exactly. As she takes the stroke and throws a lot of body weight into the bow. That's great, Raphi. Let's go to the next photograph here, and we'll see if we can get. Oh, actually, we'll go the other way. Forgot about that. We'll come back to Amy's seat in a minute. Okay, so this was the seat that she brought with her. And you can kind of see that there's a metal, some silver coloring metal on the opposite sides where we're able to sort of like build upon a rails that were already there. And we'll switch to the next one, Raphi, see what we got on the yeah. So this is what she came with, and it's quite an extraordinary seat. I think it fit her really, really well. But again, the track width between the boat that she used in her own rowing and practice was a very different width from what we had here on the Hudsons at CRI. So we made some mods. We'll go to the next one, and then this is the part that I was really excited about. So the round circle that you see in the middle of the photograph is actually from a standard foot plate that we use here at CRI. And I was able to pull, or we had some extra ones in the shop, and then I simply modified that in order to bolt the new aluminum rail to the old sort of stops. So that was kind of exciting because it actually really worked well. And it was one of those things where like, I started off thinking like, oh, this might work okay. And then I was like, yes, this is great. So anyway, long story short. So that
Bodhi,
was,
can I ask a question?
yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that Bodhi is describing is a key frustration in the fixed seat category is that the seat is an essential piece of equipment. A well-fitting seat allows the athlete to transfer power, and the power and the torque is different for PR2 fixed seat because there's a lot of up and down forces that aren't normally seen. Yeah. So what Bodhi has built here, because I know we've got some folks with visual impairments that are on here today, what Bodhi has built is a reinforced foot stretcher track that would be a base of support for not only the front edge of the seat, but also as the athlete is swinging back. Mm-hmm. So the boats are tricky to adjust, and you can't move seat to seat the way a PR3 or an open athlete would, pretty much with a few minor adjustments. These are massive redesigns for what should be fairly simple, and we're still in the infancy of really specialized equipment for the fixed seat category. Regardless of what type of boat you row, the well-fitting seat that is supportive enough to hold you in place and allow you to transfer power, but not so tight as to cause blister or harm, it is critical. And there's no way that a visiting athlete from another country could just hop into anything we had kind of on the shelf, so to speak, at CRI. So hopefully the boat manufacturers will catch up a little bit so that Bodhi's work can be done even on a more refined level just for rigging, because what we're doing right now is Bodhi's measuring people, measuring angles, and figuring out how much reinforcement is needed for the athletes when they come, especially in this category. Yeah.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Raphi, if we can keep going in the same direction, I think, in terms of the slides. So, okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. A whole year, last fall, I believe it was, we had Delmas come through, and he was one of our fantastic teen, even at was he 13, 14 years old?
No, not even. He's an 8th grader right now. He's one of Joe Walsh's kids on the para track and field. But we met him at the Yeti. The middle school regatta that we run that is has inclusion events and for kids with disabilities as well. And he's an athlete, and but really, some interesting geometry.
Yes, really, really cool. So interesting geometry. And then so then that was kind of just like, I guess what had happened is on the intake, we took a look and we take I love taking lots of photographs when we do the intakes. And just a bit of this just occurred to me. One of the things I really like about doing this work is, remembering back about how, oh gosh, when I was probably in my late teens and early 20s, I actually was a bicycle mechanic. And so I learned very quickly how to sort of fit people to bicycles. That was way back in the old days. And then I also was someone who worked in a ski shop. And so I did a lot of boot fitting, right? So there's this interesting overlap between like your foot in a boot and the way the bike works and how it's comfortable and most efficient. And, I can even go all the way back and sort of think about the ways in which that's been an incredible gift, to be able to sort of bring to this situation. So, but yeah, let's go to the next photo, Raphi, and see what we come up with. Okay, so in this case with Delmas, it's hard to tell, and Ellen, you can jump in or whatever, but with Delmas, we needed to really modify the length between the seat and between his foot plate, and really shorten the length quite a bit. So thanks to Home Depot, I went, not that we're sponsored or anything, but I went to there and we bought this little aluminum angle bar, and we were able to sort of really change the distance, but not actually make any significant changes to the structure of the boat. So if we need to return the boat to its original form, we can quickly and easily do that just by removing those aluminum brackets. So that was one thing. The next, we'll go ahead, Raphi, we'll go to the next one. And then the other part of this that you haven't seen yet, let's fast forward one more photo and see if we have a picture of the seat. Okay. So the other thing that we did a while back was we had a project for another person where we had to build a rowing ergometer seat for this person. And her MS made it really difficult for her to sort of she had some leg movement, but not all. And so in my world where I came from a world where in a race car, you put a person in a race car and you don't want that person to move at all. You don't want your body to move left or right or anything else. And in rowing, it's kind of the opposite. But what I've noticed is that, we started off with things like tractor seats and really designed more for a lot of mobility, but at the same time, we want to sort of give the athlete a place where they actually can be really well supported, and sort of like be able to move around. But so long story short is, in my mind, I thought, gosh, I could go with a race car seat, which is kind of like a go-kart seat. And instead of adding material to a tractor seat, we could take away material from a race car seat. So that's kind of where we ended up with Delmas. You can see in the picture, the pink foam is there as supportive stuff that we ended up with later on just to fit his body. But you can see that the black part of the seat there is just a cutaway of a much larger seat. And that seemed to really be a good fit. So I just find that conceptually something is fascinating about taking a seat that's very, let's definitely immobilize an athlete, but let's take away a material so that person can get the movement that they need in order to be, effective. So you want to go one more, Raphi, see what else? You can just scroll through. Yeah, so that was the underside. Here's what it looks like from the top down. And what Ellen said earlier, every single person who comes to be involved in this program or in these programs, they all need something just slightly different. So it's literally like tailored to the individual person. And that's the neat thing about taking all the photographs and taking the measurements. It's kind of almost like a discovery. You sort of do the measurements and you sort of make some sketches and you figure out what might work, and then you just trial and error. So and I think we were on our way to making some more modifications for Delmas, because I think I remember seeing him for the first or second time out on the row, but and knowing that, oh gosh, if we maybe make one or two more changes here, he may have a better platform to row from. So anyway, so that's kind of what we sort of do there in the shop. But And I like to steal lots of ideas from lots of other people, but you know, that's it's but I guess touching on those different parts of the whether it's bicycles or skis or any of the other you know, and this is something I find I do as a coach as well, taking information from different sports and different athletic abilities is really helpful. So anyway, I don't know if that helps. Is that good, Raphi? Just to see it? Yeah. Okay.
Great. All right. So next we're going to hear from a little bit about the athlete experience.
Can I just,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
can I give a shout out to Tom West? Ellen, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because
Absolutely.
Okay, because
He's driving right now. He can't be on, but yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it really
He's
is a
another part
collaborative
of our
process, and
program.
Tom has been great
Yeah,
working with everybody.
yeah. Okay, gotcha.
It's been recorded.
Yes. Great. So yeah, we're going to move next to hear from Jen. She's going to talk a little bit about her experience as one of the high performance athletes at CRI.
Thanks, Raphi. I'm a PR2 rower. So I row with my trunk and arms and shoulders to propel the boat. My first introduction to CRI was actually from a friend down in Kentucky. She was coming up to Boston for an adaptive erg competition that CRI was hosting back in 2011, I believe. And so I came to CRI for the first time to watch her compete and learned about the programs. And I decided to like sign up for, I think it was the Tuesday, like Thursday night class. And I stayed on like for the winter, and I did crash bees, and I got out on the water a little bit. But then life happened, and I stopped coming around. And then, you know, like about 3 years ago, I was kind of at a low point in my life, and I was struggling with mental health issues. And I was talking to my counselor, and she was telling me, she was like, you've got to, you know, like find a hobby. You've got to find something that you're passionate about. And I remembered that like the last time that I felt, you know, like really alive and like really, you know, like in community was when I was at CRI. And so I decided to come back and to row. And I was living in Tewksbury at the time. And so I joined a Tuesday and Thursday night class and would drive the like 45 minutes like each way to attend. And I loved it. I had like a really small class, and you know, like we would erg, and eventually I did crash bees like right away. I think like 3 weeks after I rejoined. And yeah, I just loved it. As spring came around, I joined up with the inclusion team on Friday nights, and I got out on the water, and it was challenging, but you know, like this time around, I stuck with it. And so I think I was in open para for about 8 months when I was invited to high performance para. And this was like a few weeks after my first 2K on the erg. So I think that had a little something to do with it. And
that had a lot to do with it.
So yeah, you know, like I joined the high performance group, and it was very, very different from open para. You know, like being assigned 2 workouts a day, and going over, you know, like way more, you know, like meters and much higher intensity than, you know, like I was used to. But I was definitely, you know, like up for the challenge, and you know, like I loved it. I spent, you know, like my first year just, you know, like just getting in the meters, and you know, like I'm getting faster on the erg, and you know, like I'm working on my technique. I went to trials. I did head of the Charles, and I went to the training camp out in Chula Vista, and I was looking forward to a really great 2020 when COVID hit. And so yeah, you know, like we were shut down, but we were, you know, like we were sent home with ergs, and we used an app to get our training plan, and our coaches, you know, like looked over that, and that's how we continued. And so I think we just kept in touch by texting and social media. I joined, you know, like the all of the people who on the Concept 2, you know, like communities who were, you know, like setting, you know, like world records on the erg, and just, you know, and doing, you know, like all the challenges and things like that. And that's how, you know, like I got by, you know, like the first, you know, like few months of lockdown. And we were lucky enough to get back on the water with precautions during the summer. So yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge, you know, like this winter. I miss, you know, like the big, you know, like community room, and you know, like all the smelly, you know, like boys teams and everything. We've, you know, like we found ways to adapt, and yeah, just looking forward to getting back out on the water again. I have, you know, like I'm hoping to make the national team next year in the women's like single for PR2. Yeah, that's about it from my experience.
Can I ask you one question, just maybe because you're sort of like a lot of the athletes at the training center, some athletes moved here just from the training center, but a lot of athletes learned at CRI, developed at CRI, became more competitive at CRI. So that's not that uncommon. So maybe you could say, like, what's like your favorite part, or something that you think is really cool about making that transition, and what's been like the biggest challenge in making the transition from, you know, CRI club member to, you know, elite athlete competing for a spot on the national team?
Being at, you know, like CRI and like in the physical like location, I'm like, and seeing, you know, like the open, you know, like para classes, I'm, you know, like, so I'm so often, you know, like reminded of where, you know, like I used to be in terms of, you know, like my technique and my erg scores and all of that. And I think that that just, you know, like that kind of, you know, like encourages me to work, you know, like harder, because like I can, you know, like see, you know, like how far, you know, like I've come, and I can believe that, you know, like I can do more. And I mean, the hardest, you know, like challenge that you know, that I've had is definitely, you know, like been on the water, you know, like with my balance and with my catches. It was not something that was easy, you know, like for me to get. I'm definitely more of an erger, but like I'm proud of myself for actually, you know, like sticking with it. And like last year, you know, like especially, you know, like towards the end of the summer and the fall, you know, I had so many coaches who would come up to me like when I was working at the front desk and tell me, you know, like how far I came, you know, like from seeing me, you know, like a couple of years ago. And so that, you know, like really that really meant a lot.
Awesome, thank you.
And Jen, you know, it means a lot for all of us to have you as a part of this community. So we're very, very lucky to have you. And speaking of people we are very lucky to have, our next panelist is Libby Lichter. I have been very lucky to work with her actually since the day she started at CRI. We have worked together in a bunch of different capacities, and I am very excited for her to tell you all a little bit about her work as a coach.
Yeah. Hi, folks. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've done something like this. This is a little different than talking to my, 5 blank screens of varsity kids.
Just
So
adapt, just adapt.
ju- I'll just what I'm good at. So I'll just tell you a little bit of my background and how I got involved at CRI. I did not go to Harvard. I'm sorry to disappoint any alums. I went to Tufts. So yay to any alums there. So I double majored in biology and child development. And when I was a senior, part of my graduation requirements for child development were either to write a thesis or do a field work. And I definitely wasn't writing a thesis. So I reached out to Ellen, and got involved in the para programming in that way, and came in and very quickly was integrated into more of the outreach programs and getting involved in Boston Public School middle schools and our Let's Row program. So that's just to say I love working with youth. After graduation, I went and worked at Deerfield Academy for a short while, and then COVID struck, and I returned to CRI. So I have gone away and come back a few times. Just an anecdote to start, that I think really I have not forgotten, was I was in high school and we had Travis Roy came to visit our school, and the former hockey player who recently passed in October, played, I think, 10 seconds. I don't remember what it was. His book is named, 10 Seconds of College Hockey. And he fell into the boards and was paralyzed um, right then and there. And he came and he spoke to us. And I remember bits and pieces of what he said. But at the very end, he concluded with, I hope some of you are having this realization when you first walked in that I was a chair with a man in it. And now I hope that you see that I am a man in a chair. And I think that that was really powerful for me because I absolutely had that image when I walked in. I was like, that's the biggest wheelchair I've ever seen. And I think having those moments of real honesty about how we are viewing other people, we can't ignore that when this is the type of work that we're talking about, and individuals with impairments have very often been put in those positions. And so I go to work every day, and my real goal when I go in is how can I make a disability a consideration, and how can I start to make it. I think a lot of what Bodhi was getting at is, and what Raphi said, what are you able to do? I'm not interested in what you can't do because I can't do anything with that. It's what you cannot do. I want to know what you can do, and that's what I want to strengthen because that's going to be what empowers you. So that's a lot of my coaching philosophy. I think that another fantastic piece of work is the documentary on Netflix, Crip Camp, that talks a lot about the struggles of Americans and the American Disability Act within the United States. And that was something that really, as a coach, again, I know it came out more recently, but kind of launched me off in this, okay, how can I rethink what I'm doing and how can I make it more accessible and how can I make that in my everyday life? So I've started learning a little sign language and just all sorts of things that I am taking away from my own coaching experience at CRI. How can we continue to not only make the sport of rowing accessible, but how can I take the lessons that I'm learning through finding accessibility and carrying it elsewhere? And in Crip Camp, one of the things that they discuss that I think is most vital, is at the very end, they say, what gave us success was we listened to each other and we believed each other's experiences. There was no question. If that was your experience that you had at a certain hospital, we believe you. If this was your experience, if your parent said this to you, we believe you. And I think when you are dealing with individuals who may have an impairment, that has been to me the biggest key, because, and I have this in my notes, which is you don't know, they know. And I'm never going to know what my athlete needs better than my athlete. And so I think sometimes having those conversations are challenging to navigate for two reasons. Perhaps the person that we're talking to doesn't communicate in the same way that we do for some reason. Maybe Autism spectrum disorder makes it very challenging for them to make eye contact or, speak to you. It makes them very nervous. Or there is a developmental delay and I have to repeat what I've said over and over and over again. And I'll talk in circles with folks. I will go until the point is made. And I think that's a challenge. And many of us back away from that, or we take everything a step down. And I think that's the wrong move. I never try to simplify what I'm saying. I guess I talk to everyone the way that I talk to everyone because folks can tell when you're talking differently to them. And I think that one of the biggest respects that I always try to pay to my athletes is I treat all of my athletes the same. No one is different. Boy, girl, left, right, PR 1, 2, 3, varsity, novice, everyone's the same. And I will talk to you. And if I have to repeat myself, okay, I have to repeat myself. If I have to try to use a different word, I'll try to use a different word. But if I'm always the same coach, then it's more consistency for my athletes and it makes it easier for me to have the conversation. I think the other part of that in having conversations with adaptive athletes that's challenging is if someone's in a wheelchair, like they know they're in a wheelchair, it's not like a naughty word to start asking, is there something that I can do to help you? Do you need assistance? Would you mind telling me more about that? Because as a coach, there are things I need to know and I have to acquire information. So at the beginning, 2 years ago, absolutely, I was terrified to ask those kinds of questions for fear of hurting someone, offending someone, but I have to remind myself that all I'm trying to do is assist them. And I think it's far more about what questions I'm asking and how I'm asking them than the fact that I'm asking questions. And so I think if we can get past that barrier, it allows us to actually start being productive. Let me see what else I have down here. Oh, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's written right here. I had a kid come in for an intake a couple of weeks ago and he sharp as a tack. I mean, so smart. And that's the other thing I'll say is when I was a kid, I couldn't stand it when people spoke to my parents and not to me, as if if I couldn't see that they were talking to my parents and not to me. And another thing of, nobody is going to know an athlete or an individual better, and no one's going to be able to assess what they need or what makes them uncomfortable better than them. And so I will always try to have a conversation with them. And if a parent wants to jump in, that's totally fine. But I always start with talking to my athlete. And we went outside and we pulled out the erg and I tried sitting him down and walking him through the stroke. And it just wasn't working. He wasn't getting it. It wasn't quite clicking. But he was about 12. So I thought, okay, let me get a whiteboard and some markers. And we started doodling and we started drawing. And before I knew it, he was drawing something totally different. And I was like, okay, no, put the markers away. This isn't it. But I knew he got what I was trying to get him to do. So I was like, okay, how about I sit down on the erg and you teach me? And bingo, we had it. I was like, yes, and it's just all about this trying to take advantage of, again, like Raphi said, what are you able to do? What is going to be the approach that works for you? Because I knew he had it. It's just how can I get him to, where's the, the output? How can I get him to show me? And I think that gave him a lot more confidence. And he had this adorable thing where as soon as he started to get it, he would say, okay, I'm getting the hang of it now. And it's like, those are the moments I lived for because that's so cute. Like, yes, you are getting the hang of it. And that's awesome that you feel that way. In addition to that, I studied child development. I took a lot of classes on intellectual theories and a class called The Exceptional Child about, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, everything. And that was all well and great for introduction and exposure, but at the end of the day, know the person, not the symptoms, because it is autism spectrum. disorder, and no one person with Down syndrome is going to be like another person with Down syndrome, and no one person with cerebral palsy is going to be like another person with cerebral palsy. And so I didn't throw my textbook out the window, but I did put it on the shelf because I may know what might be challenging for someone with autism spectrum disorder, and they might totally surprise me. And I would rather, again, find out from them what they need than come in and be like, all right, I know what we're doing. This is it. Boom, boom, boom. And then it doesn't work for anybody involved and we're not able to progress. I think just a little touching on how that has translated into virtual. We are making it work. However, that's not to say that it works. And I don't think that this is anything that CRI isn't doing. I think it simply just is the nature of what the athletes need, especially individuals with intellectual disabilities. I mean, I have a friend who works at a nonprofit, and they have somewhat, not CRI, different nonprofit. And they, when COVID started, had a counselor coming in, just checking in with folks. And she made a point to say, we have these phone calls and that's all great, but when we log off, we all kind of feel like a little wonky, right? And it's because our brain is confused. We just saw this person, like I'm Raphi, I'm looking at you right now. And then I'm gonna close my computer and you're not even gonna walk out the door, you're just gone. And I think that that is something that's been incredibly challenging for a lot of our athletes, but they do get to see each other. And if nothing else, if the workout isn't executed perfectly, I don't care. Half the time it doesn't. Half the time I have kids, someone walks off screen, I don't know where they go for 8 minutes. I'm going to control what I can control. I'm going to play good music. I'm going to write a workout that I think is engaging. I always do a holiday themed workout if there's a holiday. Always. We did a 12 days of Christmas one. We did a Hanukkah one. We did a New Year's one. I think I did a Halloween one. And I am trying to relate it. Again, I try to make a point of saying, this will be good. We're building up a little bit more volume so that when we get back to CRI, because I think that for a lot of us, I think I may be one of the youngest folks here. A year is a long time for me still. Like I'm really struggling to just be like, oh God, okay, we are gonna be back at CRI one of these days. Like, oh man.
It's
But
coming. It's coming.
I know. Knowing that I don't quite have enough life experience that I can be like, okay, we're gonna keep moving forward. And I know that that's gonna be okay and that this matters and I should keep exercising because we're going to start training again. And I think that a lot of that dissonance is even more challenging for folks with intellectual impairments. And so trying to just bring it full circle without getting into but we can't go, it's COVID. I know, in the future, when it's safe. So
We're all kind of feeling that too.
exactly. So in that sense, I wish that I had more like, this is how you make virtual training for youth with intellectual impairments. But I don't know if that book has been written yet, and I don't know if it's going to get written because I have not seen it work.
Well, I think
to the fullest extent, right? We're never going to get the same training effects, but the maintaining the connection, keeping people in our community. I mean, that's so much of the goals of these programs. And in that sense, I'm just going to keep doing what I can do. I'm going to keep controlling what I can control. And if I lose someone for 15 minutes, but they come back at the end and I get to ask them how their weekend was, great. We've made the connection. I have seen them this week and they know that CRI, that rowing, that experience is still there for them. Again, I wish I had more things to say. I think it has just been a real challenge.
I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions in case there are any. That was like awesome. I agree with you. It's just so much about making sure they're connected to us, not the best yoga video in the world or the best, erg video in the world. So are there any questions, Raphi, that you're seeing from the chat, or would anyone like to raise their hand and ask a live question?
I'm not seeing any in the chat right now, but if
Ooh,
anyone just
I
wants
see
to
a
unmute and
raised hand.
excellent,
Andrew Johnson,
excellent.
you're on.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible? I am. Excellent.
Yes.
As I don't know, a self-proclaimed community rowing all-star has-been, I do want to underscore what they've what everyone said tonight, and say that no matter what the challenge, CRI doesn't throw in the towel, and it's been awesome seeing how things change. And if any of you happen to be like parents or prospective rowers who have any kind of disability, or parents of someone who does, can't recommend this place more strongly, and it's one of the coolest aspects of CRI. But I am supposed to ask a question, so
That's
I'll
okay.
say,
Andrew, I'm going to ask you a question because you told me you were coming back to row. And
check it out. I got an erg for Christmas.
Oh
I have
my
my
God.
Polar, and I'm slowly turning from a no-eyed couch potato into something.
There you go. For those of you guys that don't know Andrew, he is a blind athlete that was with us my very first year on the national team, coaching the para team in 2013. And so he was a national team athlete and a Paralympian before CRI was even a training center. So he's an amazing athlete to work with, amazing spokesperson, and he doesn't live very far. So he has threatened to come to the boathouse again. And so we'll see Andrew in a boat. Mark my words. Once everything is safe and open again, he's quite a good oarsman.
I'm psyched for it.
Good.
When do we get the all blindfolded head of the Charles race? That's my question.
Whenever you say. Just as long as the coxswain can not be blindfolded, we'll be good.
Please. That's easy mode.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a question in the chat about opportunities to volunteer. I'm going to put my email in the chat momentarily. If you're interested in volunteering with our para programs, just shoot me an email. We'll basically, my intake process for volunteers is not that dissimilar from that for our athletes. We'll have a conversation about your interests and goals with volunteering, and then I'll do my best to match you with a program that I think will best fit both your availability, the needs of the programs, etc. This is also with the caveat of, obviously, while there's still a pandemic, we are very limited on the numbers of volunteers we can have in our programs. Especially, we can't really do too much right now while we're virtual, but even when we're back at the boathouse, it will likely be a gradual phase back in. But that being said, we do always need volunteers. All of our programs always need volunteers. So if anyone is interested, just shoot me an email. And to address a question about weekends, yeah, we run para programming almost every single day of the week. So if there is only one day of the week that you can do, there's a good chance we have a para program on that day for you to volunteer with.
You mentioned several times about emails, but what are the emails? Do you have a list of addresses or something?
Yeah, so I am currently putting my email into the chat box. If you need to find it again, you can just search my name on the CRI website. It should come right up.
Hey, Ellen.
Yes.
Joe here.
Hi, Joe.
Can you just give us a snapshot of the high performance program in terms of how many athletes are in it and what types of athletes, what types of rowing class, the P1, P2, P3, give us a snapshot of the demographics of that program. It's really impressive to me. So
yeah, sure. Right now we have about let's say 8 or 9 athletes right now. Most of them are in the PR3 category. We've been hosting the 4 camp for a while, so part of that reason we skew toward PR3 is was our sort of biggest and most successful of the Paralympic boat classes. But we've got men and women in the PR3 category. We have 2 women, one PR1, who was our national team sculler, Hallie Smith, and PR2 is Jen, who you've met earlier. Everyone else is PR3, although there's a differentiation of PR3 where some athletes are eligible for the double. So we've got athletes eligible for just the 4, which means they have kind of a minimal disability to be eligible. Then we've got athletes training for the double or even possibly the pairs, but the double requires a slightly more restricted level of mobility, usually an amputation above the knee, below the knee amputation. It's a pretty impressive group, and they do a training program that is fairly similar to what the open senior national teams would do. So they have a group session in the morning. Well, we're not group right now, but typically we would do a group training session. And it's really fun because despite the fact that we have people rowing with just their arms and shoulders or trunk and arms or the full measure of a leg drive, we put everyone on the water together. And even during the time where everyone was in singles, we'd find ways that we could still all compete with one another, either by staggering the start on competitive pieces. So there would be some expected time differentials that you might have or on the water, but we were able to keep the group together, even though they're different categories. And it's been pretty amazing. So among the group, about half of them have been on a national team before. The other half are what we call like hopefuls. They're at the erg score level that would be anticipated among the elite of their sport, but haven't yet competed on the national scene or made a national team yet, but they're kind of in the pool. And what does it mean to be a training center athlete is they get a bit of support for the coaching at CRI, some fun gear. Some of the athletes are actually eligible because of their national team experience for things like the elite athlete health insurance through the USOPC, and even some financial support. So that's kind of where the elite group is right now. We've got a couple world champions that are just kind of walking among us mortals, and some Paralympic medalists there as well. And it has been a kind of a rough year to have things delayed for the games, of course, but then also a bit, hopefully not too much longer in isolation, because the fun of rowing and many of the boats that we're going to be aspiring to are team boats. So we're all looking forward to getting back into the team boats.
So I've got a couple of questions coming into the chat that I'll field right now. First, I want to address the question about what does all these PR numbers mean? So I'm going to kick that to you, Ellen, everyone's favorite.
I know, I apologize. I wasn't a fan when they changed these names, although they have stuck. These are the new Paralympic nomenclature for what used to be the LTA4, leg, trunk, and arms, is the PR3, para rowing third category, I guess. The trunk and arms, formerly trunk and arms, is now PR2, para rower second level. And PR1 is the athletes generally spinal cord injury, high level, where they're using just the arms and shoulders in the rowing stroke. We used to call it arms and shoulders, very simple to understand, and that's now PR1. So PR1, 2, and 3 are the boat classes for people with disabilities that are contested at the Paralympic Games or even World Championships. So that's kind of different. There's a whole host of other adaptive inclusion. There are intellectual disability categories. There's a whole nother level of categories for people to compete that have a disability, but they would not have an eligible impairment that would allow them to compete at the Paralympic Games. So we offer a full complement of many types of programs, but anything with the PR1, 2, or 3 just indicates that that is a boat class that is contested at the Paralympic Games or the World Rowing Championships. It is hard to keep remembering that what those names are.
It's also a constantly evolving classification system. As Ellen mentioned, like this was a major shift when they shifted to doing the PR nomenclature system. And it is probably by no means the last big shift we'll see in how classifications work. We have another question about volunteering and about opportunities to be for athletes and volunteers to be matched one-on-one. We have done that a little bit in the past, depending on the program and the needs of each program. Typically, so when a volunteer is assigned to, let's say, Libby's intellectually disabled teens and young adults group, pretty quickly, the best matches for that volunteer and people within the group will become clear. And because we tend to have multiple volunteers in programs like that, those one-on-one relationships sort of develop. We have in the past had specific volunteers come in to work with specific athletes, and we've found that to be greatly successful. So it's not something that we will 100% guarantee. We do recognize that it is a very likely outcome in terms of working with athletes. These relationships are, as Libby was saying, really what makes CRI a community, and we're very, very lucky that we get to sort of see that play out in this way when we're working with volunteers.
I had just one anecdote that I wanted to share, and then we're probably going to wrap up pretty quickly. I'll type my email in the chat room as well, in case anyone wanted any follow-up. But a few people have asked me, what has been the difference to have CRI be a training center to the athletes or to the community? And I'll just share one story, and maybe Joe Walsh might even appreciate this. He used to be part of the US OPC, or I don't know what the previous initials were before they merged, but I think it gives us a platform to be seen, and that's a really important part of why we do what we do. The visibility of our athletes with varying abilities out in the community every day with everyone on the Charles River, and certainly when we travel and go to either national or international competition. It also has given us some voice. So, I found out while I was in Rio that the Paralympic medal was not worth as much as an Olympic medal, meaning that a US athlete who would win a gold medal in the Olympic Games in Rio would get something like $25,000. And if you won a gold medal in the Paralympics, you would get $5,000. I didn't even know that was a thing until we were over there, and it was a hard pivot to make for the athletes when we sort of discussed it. And I said, "Hey, you win the gold, don't worry, I'll get you your money," because I believe in that. But what happened in the year following, the USOPC rep would come to CRI, and the athletes asked, they said, "Hey, when we were in Rio, that was really sucky. We didn't like that. That was a real problem." And at the time, the person who came said, "Well, geez, I agree with you, but I don't think that it's going to change." And one of the athletes, who's not on the call, but I'll call her out anyway, Danny Hansen, said, "Well, listen, lady, if you're not as mad about it as we are, you're in the wrong job." And so it was about a year and a half later. I'm not saying that was the thing that changed it, but it did change a couple of years later, a year and a half later. And just the ability for our athletes to speak directly to a US Olympic Committee rep, that did make a difference. She was not a decision maker at the time. It wasn't like that was the thing that changed everything. There had been some other movement in that regard, but the rep did bring it up to me later. She said, "Yeah, I remember that day in the weight room at CRI." So CRI, being as big as it is and as visible as it is in many categories, the youth programs, for example, and now our para programs, we do have a way to influence things, and hopefully for the better. So I just kind of remember that very powerfully, that whole cycle of how that happened. And anyway, just really, really proud of not only the athletes' accomplishments, but their ability to speak up and be leaders. We've got some of our athletes serving as athlete rep on different US rowing committees and things like that. So just really, really proud of all the work that all the athletes and all the coaches do.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, that is a wonderful note, Ellen, for us to end on. It all comes back to CRI is a community, and that is what we are here for. That's why we're sharing these stories, because we feel it's valuable that everyone in our community hears all of the honestly, absolutely breathtakingly amazing things people are doing that you may not even hear about because we are such a large community. So with that, I want to thank all of you so much for coming. If you have any further questions or anything, feel free to reach out. I love sharing, obviously, what we do with these programs. It's like, really, this is the highlight of my job, getting to share this stuff with you. And I hope we see you guys around soon.